Welcome to Roll for Insight, the D&D podcast where we dive into the game, the lore, and the internet's favorite arguments. Grab your dice and your character sheet, and let's roll for insight. Hello, welcome to Roll for Insight. In this episode, we're going to be talking about one of the most iconic items in D&D, the 10-foot pole, and this is from the 2024 D&D Player's Handbook. Now, it might not look exciting on paper, but this thing has been saving adventurers from traps and ambushes and bad decisions literally for decades. So in this episode, we'll cover the item description and what it actually does mechanically. We'll talk about some practical gameplay uses and benefits and limitations. We'll go through a full list of creative applications for the pole, and of course we'll pull some opinions and ideas from the internet. And last, we'll end on some fun fact information. Okay, first topic, the pole. Now, the item cost is 5 copper pieces. The weight is 7 pounds. A pole is 10 feet long. You can use it to touch something up to 10 feet away. If you must make a strength or athletics check as part of a high or long jump, you can use the pole to vault, giving yourself advantage on the check. So, a few key points here. The pole is 10 feet long. You can use it to touch something up to 10 feet away, and you can use it to vault, giving advantage on the strength and athletics checks for high and long jumps. So what that actually means is the pole is a safe way to interact with your environment, and it lets you do lots of things like interact with objects and trigger effects and test environments without putting your character in danger. So let's go through the vaulting mechanics first. So if a jump requires strength or athletics, you get advantage. So situationally, very useful if you're crossing gaps or clearing obstacles or climbing some sort of awkward terrain. Now, looking at some gameplay uses here, the safety first concept here is what the pole is all about. It's designed for things like testing traps, checking surfaces. You can interact from a safe distance with things. You can do that by opening or pushing or prodding things without stepping into danger. You can stay away from pressure plates or hazardous terrain or suspicious looking areas. And you can use it as an actual tool, not just as an object. So one of the things we put together here was 20 things you can do with a 10-foot pole. So first category here, let's talk about trap and safety uses. So use the pole to trigger pressure plates safely. Use it to check for tripwires. You can probe suspicious floors and tiles. You can test for illusions, like does the pole pass through it? You can also open up chests or doors from a distance, or you can trigger dart traps intentionally, or check the depth of water or pits or mud. If you're looking at some exploration uses, you can measure gaps or distances between two things. You can vault across the small gaps with the advantage on the athletics checks. You can also use the pole as a stick for balance when crossing things. You can push objects out of reach, you can retrieve items from dangerous areas, you can clear out webs or debris, or you can hold something at a distance like a torch or another object by attaching it to the pole. Now, there's also some other combat adjacent uses. You can push enemies or objects, and sometimes that's DM dependent. You can create space between you and other hazards in the area. You can hold open a door or hold it closed to bar entry. You can also set up some simple traps or obstacles with the pole. Then there's a few other utility uses. You can use the pole to carry items between two people. Put the pole up on your shoulder. Or you can use it as an improvised stretcher or a leverage tool. So the key thing here is, if you carry it with you, you need to use it, because if your party has ever said, I'm going to walk forward and check the room, then you probably should have led with the 10-foot pole. Now, looking at a couple benefits and limitations here. Benefits, this is extremely cheap. It's 5 copper pieces. The pole can also work in almost any environment, and it's one of those tools that just helps the creative problem-solving aspect of D&D. However, it does require DM interpretation for a lot of the uses you'll get away with the pole, and it can be awkward to carry. A 10-foot pole is quite long. It's also not going to be useful in every single environment, and it definitely doesn't replace skill checks. It can only help avoid risks with things like traps. Now, some tables also don't really run traps or exploration very heavily, which might reduce the value of the pole. But flipping over to the internet discourse around the 10-foot pole, I mean, this is classic for a reason. Longtime players almost always recommend bringing a 10-foot pole with you into dungeons, because it's a very simple tool, it's easily replaceable, and it can help prevent the simple avoidable mistakes. And oftentimes with new players, you just don't use them enough. Usually, when you're new, you're relying on things like perception checks and passive investigation checks, instead of actually interacting with the world in a safe manner. Now, of course, a lot of the exploration side of the game is DM dependent, and some DMs are going to reward that creativity, and others sometimes just avoid the traps or skip that interaction entirely, so that is going to affect how useful the 10-foot pole feels. But carrying a 10-foot pole with you is just good adventuring habits. So to wrap things up for this episode, let's go over some fun facts about the 10-foot pole. Now, this item has been a part of D&D since the earliest editions, and it became pretty famous because in early dungeons, they were extremely trap-heavy, and players needed ways to survive without taking constant damage. And you may have heard of the phrase, "I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole." It's actually reflected literally in D&D gameplay. Now, looking up the origins of this phrase, it turns out it dates back to around the mid-1700s, and it evolved from earlier idioms like "not to be handled with a pair of tongs," and that basically signified that you wanted to avoid something or keep your distance from something or someone. Now, there's also a link to the British saying of not touching something with a barge pole, which is one of those long poles you can use to maneuver your boat in shallow water or push off of things. And you also have the slightly longer variation, the 39.5-foot pole, that you don't want to touch the Grinch with. So remember, to be a good adventurer, you have to be safe. And to be safe, you have to carry a 10-foot pole. Well, that's it for this session of Roll for Insight. Thanks for listening, and thank you to all our supporters on patreon.com/rollforinsightpodcast. And we will see you next time.